So this topic came up, and it's one of my favorite rants because it's one of the ones where all the conservatives who just don't like liberals complain about SJWs putting politics into their Warhammer, and these guys, you know who these guys are. They know who they are. Oh, we can't have female space marines because of lore. Well, I understand they don't like SJWs, so their agenda is they don't like SJWs. And if, women say, hey, we'd like female space marines, they obviously have a fit. All right. So I, first of all, will state my clarity that I think, female space marines are just fine. Let's have some female space marine models. It's a big deal in terms of the accessibility of our hobby and the whole idea that Sisters of Battle are Marines in power armor with boobs, and that's the equivalent thing, and nobody complains that Sister Battles are all men. Sisters of Battle are a dumb idea. All right? Granted, they're part of the lore and they've worked them in, but the lore changes and you can do anything you want with lore. There's no rule in stone that it's got to be this way, right? And it's not like miscasting, an African American as an Apollo 13 astronaut when clearly none of the Apollo 13 astronauts are there. There is nothing real about Warhammer, right? There's no grounding for it. The changes to canon can be arbitrary, right? So we're going to discount that all the way. And I know people are going to whine about canon and complain about canon, but you know what? Once upon a time, there were Zotes that weren't Tyranids, and there were Squats, and there were Ogren, and there were Space Halflings, right? And there were all these things, and they're not there. Canon changes. One time there were no Tau. Now there are Tau. Canon changes. One time there were no Primaris. Now there are Primaris. Canon changes. Reboot Gilliam was dead. Now he's alive. Canon changes. Okay, that's just how it works. And canon changes for commercial advantage. So one of the things we look at when we see this article from a former GW employee, right, talking about an ex-GW employee talking about what they did, right? The main essence of the article, of course, is let's be clear, there aren't femme space marines now. It has nothing to do with lore. The models were sculpted and sold by GW, and indeed they were. I can attest to that. Here is the GW catalog to which he's referring to, and here we have a female marine with a power sword and a bolter gun, and another female marine with a power sword. We've got other guys with chainswords and stuff. These aren't people in power armor. There were other kinds of just generic power armor. These were intended to be female marines. The sculpts on the armor, including the backpacks and the shape of the armor, looks like marine armor. And this dovetails nicely with what we are being told by the article, right? The article says there were female space marines, right? And at the time, gaming was male-dominated space, right? In 1987, very few women were involved in role-playing. There were some, but there were very few. There were even fewer women in miniature wargaming, right? It was an exclusively male hobby, and it remained an exclusively male hobby because this is when all the stereotypes came out. I know I lived with these stereotypes. I dealt with them. I was, tried not to be a stereotype because I had other interests, but I understood. There were people that did not bathe. They lived in their mother's basement. They did not come out. They were nerds and geeks. Geeks had not won the culture wars. So in 1987, nobody was buying female space marines. The lore is added on top of that. If we look about it, calling Alan Merritt's full quote, these were sculpted by the designers female space marines, right? They didn't release them as female space marines because there wasn't an official brief on that idea, right? That they hadn't made a decision. But the female models weren't selling, so they left them out. Now, fast forward, it's no longer 1987. Yes, probably many of you know people who fit the stereotype. I know that women who play the game who are close to me don't go to the game store to play the game because they don't like getting leered at by guys who want to fawn all over them or hit on them or do all these other things. So these women do not go to the store to play the game, but they still play the game, right? There are people who are interested. The nerds won the pop culture wars. We no longer, if you play 40K, risk getting stuffed in a locker by, the football players, right? This is the new reality. And the new reality is the market has changed. So now it is time for Games Workshop to update thinking about Warhammer. There are people out there to reach. If there are 600 gamers out there who want female space marines and they're willing to spend $1,000 a year, on space marines and stuff, it's a market that's, potentially a $6 million market. GW turns about 300 million and they got about an $89 million profit, right? If you can make a significant amount of profit for a little investment in sculpting a few more models, right? Not creating a whole range, then you should do it. And chances are it's not 600 people who want female space marines. It's probably closer to 6,000. Now we're talking a $6 million profit margin. Maybe it's 60,000, right? You don't know what the levels are of people who will buy stuff. So therefore, as a commercial enterprise, GW needs to reach out as an obligation to its shareholders, right, to gain more people who are participating in the hobby. That's their business. They aren't in business to preserve your lore. The lore doesn't exist for them to protect and produce models according to the lore. They make models that they can sell, and then the lore will follow, right? So yes, it is time for GW to have female space marines. There is a female audience for it. No, the Sisters of Battle are a separate but equal idea, and they aren't female space marines. They don't have the lore. They don't have the character or the personality. They are nuns with guns to make a lot of sexist men feel good about stereotypes of women and, the virgin warrior and all of that. They're a fantasy at best. At worst, they're a way of marginalizing female players by saying, here's this rich world and you can play anything you want, but if you want to play the Imperial human people, you can only play Sisters of Battle. Never mind that the Space Marines are the most important part of GW's lineup. We all know that. The Space Marines are the biggest selling items. Many, many people play Space Marines, right? And they play other things. There are very few people who play other things who don't also have a Space Marine army, right? Maybe you're one of them. Great. I appreciate that. I've played every army in 40K. I don't have a problem with this, right? You're not talking about a major line. You're talking about a slight change to lore, and you're talking about a slight change to the model range that may well open the door to giving people a better opportunity to play the game. And yeah, the identity thing does matter. People get interested in it, and they want to play in the lore that they're interested in. The Dark Angels alone have a much richer and deeper lore than the entire Sisters of Battle, and the Dark Angels are only one chapter. Death Watch, Grey Knights, right? All of these things, all of these chapters have a rich lore and a rich history that goes well beyond what any other faction really has. Each chapter is virtually its own faction, and people get excited about participating in that lore. So yeah, make female Space Marines, draw the audience in, the same applies to race, right? GW understands their positioning in the market, and that's why they released that statement. It's not bending the knee to social justice warriors. It is actively making a good business decision. right? And if you see it as bending the knee to social justice warriors, guess what? You don't have to participate. You can not buy female space marines. You can ignore those sections in the book. I don't buy Primaris marines. They don't exist for me. I play my game without them. I don't walk out of the tournament when some guy shows up with Primaris marines, but I'm not interested in them. So I don't participate in that section. And you're free to do the same thing. You don't need to participate. No, holding a gun to your head and saying, you have to buy female space marines. No, it's opening the hobby up in a way that might bring more people in, right? And there's a lot of reasons for this. Not the least is if you want to have movies, you've got to rethink a whole lot of the grimdark. And they are. A whole lot of the way 40K is, all the things that the community says, oh, they shouldn't change, are things that are going to make it more difficult for them to get a movie out of this deal, right? And they're going to want a movie at some point if the movies ever come back. But that's an entirely different topic. You want to be open. We want to have more players play. That's obvious. Let them play Space Marines. And in all honesty, for the people who are out there saying, well, nobody complains that the Sisters of Battle are all men, the Sisters of Battle are the faction that should go away. That's stupid. They should not have had a faction that was all women. And it only exists because they didn't want to, or they didn't include females in the Space Marines. If you want to have your Sisters of Battle, great. Hey, that's a faction that appeals to everybody. But it's not an alternative to female Space Marines. It's not an answer to making the hobby less open. It is not an answer to making the hobby less sexist, right? And the hobby has a lot of people who play it, and they preserve sexist and racist and right-wing things. Now, what burns me is they say, no female Space Marines. We don't want SJWs putting their politics in Warhammer. Yet what are they doing but putting their politics in Warhammer? And they're hanging the thread on the flimsy little bit of artificial fake lore that makes no difference to anybody and isn't going to stop people from playing the game. So they don't want to produce a few female Space Marines. And it has nothing to do with Warhammer or the lore. It has everything to do with their real world politics that they keep blaming other people for putting in Warhammer. The hobby is just trying to include everybody. If you can't include everybody in the hobby, Games Workshop said you can leave. But guess what? You don't even have to leave the hobby. You can play with your own little group in your own little Nazi bunker and do what you want and play your games, and you can ignore the fact that women exist. We know you don't like women. We know you hate women. We know you don't like people of color, and we know you hate people of color. Just admit it. Don't get online and say, oh, it's the lore. It's the lore. No, it's not the lore. You're a racist. You're a sexist. At least have the stones to admit that, right? Looks like I might have some time left. And, look at what they're saying here in the in the comments, right? We get down the comments because these are always fun. People get on the comments and they're like, oh, we got to do this and we got to do that and we shouldn't have Space Marines. Christ, this thing is long. I hit all this commercial shit. Do we get to comments? Are there comments? There were comments. I know I saw. Here's some comments. Let's find a random comment. Right? I realize I hate the whole gender stigma that everything needs to be gender neutral. We are not the same. Right? Okay, so that's a good, that's one thing saying, hey, he's right. That's hate speech and violence to the modern left. It is. We are not all the same, right? We are all the same. We are all equally capable in our modern world. Sure, there are biological differences between men and women, but they don't exist in science fiction. They don't have to exist, right? Let's see where we at. Retcons are a bad idea. If you just want to sell more miniatures in the short term, sure. But if you break the lore badly enough, you'll end up disenfranchising a massive portion of your base. Games Workshop does not care, right? They want new players. You're going to be disenfranchised? Really? You're going to stop playing the game? Where's my favorite one? My favorite comment the guy does is he says, when they want to do that, any one of these guys says, when they do that, I'm going to sell all my toys. The day they put crap like this is the day I quit the hobby and sell everything I have. Yeah, right, JB Wilson 24. That's horse shit. You're not going to quit the hobby. You're not going to sell all your stuff. And guess what? You know what? If you want to, great. Sell it to me, sell it to somebody else, sell it cheap. You want to quit the hobby, just give it to me. How about that? This is all bullshit posturing. Black metal here says it right. You won't be missed. The whole point is that women want to play Space Marines. There is a flap in the media about women wanting to play Space Marines. And if even 1/10 of those women want to play Space Marines or are complaining about it in the media, then we're selling more models and we're making our hobby more available and we will all benefit in the long run. So, yeah, we need female Space Marines. It costs nothing and it benefits us all. Anyway, that's my rant. I know it's a rant, but I just wish people would stop posturing behind lore and come to terms with the fact that what they want is no women in their hobby, and they are advocating that Games Workshop shouldn't do things that include women in their hobby. So let's just leave it at that. I believe there should be female Space Marines. You're free to disagree. I'm a shareholder in Games Workshop. I want them to increase their profits. Hey, but that's me. Maybe I'm a mercenary. But don't give me the respect for the lore. Just hang that article up and hang that defense up and toss it out because the lore isn't fixed.